Hey everyone, I'm ArmorGaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Super Tomato. It is said that if you take a bite out of this monster, you can become unbeatable. However, to this day, no one has been able to bite him or even touch him, so that story remains a rumor. Who will be the hero to devour Super Tomato? And just look at this little guy, from a child to his teenage years to adulthood. I'm just gonna say, even though a lot of people think this is a weird design, I absolutely love it. So anyways, as of the time I'm recording this video, there are currently 27 magic legendary monsters. So this analysis will be comparing Super Tomato to the other 26 magic monsters. So we start things off with power. Super Tomato has a power of 3,201, and this power puts Super Tomato in 15th place, along with monsters like Mr. Scratch, Lernian, and Violet. So compared to other magic monsters, it's not really high, and it's also not really low, it's more of in the middle. But I'm also going to go ahead and say that doesn't really matter because Super Tomato is what we refer to as a denier or an immobilizer. The main purpose of Super Tomato is to stop the enemy from attacking you, so he doesn't really need to dish out damage, therefore he doesn't really need a high power. Next up is life. Super Tomato has a life of 24,127, and unfortunately for Super Tomato, this is actually the lowest life of all 27 magic monsters. That's right, this monster, Super Tomato, has the lowest life. So this is rather unfortunate because there are so many magic monsters that have such a high life. Now to some extent you can argue his life being that low doesn't matter, considering when you see his skills, he can immobilize a ton of times, a ton of turns, so you can argue that it doesn't matter too much. But at the same time, having such a low life, once you progress along the game and your opponents tend to have really high level runes, level 9, level 10 runes, if for some reason the enemy attacker monster doesn't get immobilized and they hit Super Tomato, most likely they're going to finish you off in one hit. And now we move on to speed. Super Tomato has a speed of 3,465. This is a really good speed. This actually puts him in 5th place along with monsters like Houdini, Mr. Scratch, Scar the Outcast, Uru, and Toymaster. And even when you compare this speed to immobilizers from other elements, this is typically what the top immobilizers tend to have, a speed of 3,465. So in the magic category, the only monsters faster than Super Tomato that would also be classified as immobilizers would be Galante and to some extent Cupid. Cupid only has a single stun skill, but with a speed of 3,542, that's really all you need, specifically when we're talking about players with really high level runes, because really all you have to do is just stop the enemy immobilizer from immobilizing you, and then if you have high level runes, your attacker should be able to one hit the enemy team, or at the very least get rid of the main threat. And then there's Galante, who has a speed of 3,476, who has a 100% stamina drain skill, 2 possession skills, and an AoE blind skill, so he's also really good and faster than Super Tomato. But every other magic monster is either on par or slower than Super Tomato. And as for his trait, he's immune to possession, which considering he's a magic monster, that is the exact trait you want to have. In a team wars, even if the enemy is faster than you and they do possession on your team, that doesn't matter because you're immune to possession, Super Tomato won't be possessed, and then you're going to be able to respond with a possession of your own. So it's a really good trait for Super Tomato. So anyways, let's move on to skills. For the default skills, we have Salad Strike, Side Dish Revenge, nothing too interesting here. As for the ultimate skill, Vampiric Vegetables. Deals moderate magic damage to all enemies, may give double damage to all allies, may possess all targets. This is a magic based skill that deals 40 damage to all of the enemy monsters, and considering Super Tomato's power isn't the highest, this skill really won't be dealing that much damage. But the effects of this skill are pretty good. Not only do all of your monsters get double damage, all of the enemy monsters will be possessed. Now of course, in a team wars, the enemy magic monster will most likely be immune to possession, but you can still immobilize the attacker, which is the other legendary monster, and you'll be able to possess the rarity. You'd be extremely fortunate if you could get this skill on the first turn. In skills group 1 we have Flavorful, Fad Diets, Calorie Counting. I don't think any of these skills are really worth mentioning, but I will say this about Fad Diets. It deals moderate magic damage, it applies one random negative effect to a target. And in case some of you are thinking about running this skill, I would actually have to advise against it. I know a lot of us tend to like these skills a lot, that gives one random negative effect or 2 random negative effects, but really the fact that it only gives one random negative effect to just one individual target, it's really not that good, especially considering all the different negative debuffs that are actually in the game. So no need to try your luck with random negative effects, especially when Super Tomato has a ton of great skills. So on to skills group 2 we go, and we start things off with Deadly Recipe. Deals moderate special damage, removes 50% of stamina from target, requires cooldown. This is a special based skill that deals 40 damage to a single enemy monster, it costs 28 stamina, and it has a 2-turn cooldown. The effect of this skill is that it will drain 50% of the enemy's stamina. On your typical legendary monster, that is 70 stamina points. This is a pretty straightforward skill, and one of the few skills that actually deal damage that Super Tomato has, and I would consider running this skill, because you never know when draining that remaining 70 stamina points can mean the difference between winning the game or losing the game. Typically, if the enemy monster uses some sort of AoE and then than some single hit, removing 50% stamina points, they're not going to be able to use an attack, they're going to have to recharge. Moving on to Weakening Cocktail. Deals low magic damage to all enemies, may apply damage reduction to all targets, requires cooldown. This is a magic based AoE that deals 20 damage to all of the enemy monsters, it costs 35 stamina and has a 3-turn cooldown, and this skill will apply damage reduction to all of the enemy monsters. Now the good thing about this skill is that it will reduce the damage all of your monsters take by 25%. However, in Team Wars I would have to argue that this really isn't needed. Team Wars team typically consists of a deny monster that has all speed runes, an attacker that has like 2 strength runes and a speed rune, and then the rarity monster who knows what that monster will have, although most of the time it will have team speed runes. So for that reason, the only monster you really need to do damage reduction on would be the attacker, because the legendary monster with base power stats and then the legendary monster with team speed runes, which means it's going to have base power stats too, they really aren't going to be dealing that much damage to begin with anyways. So Weakening Cocktail, I'd say don't run the skill. Next up is Vitamin Overdose. May apply damage boost to target, may possess target, requires cooldown. This is a magic based skill that targets a single enemy. It deals no damage, however, it costs 28 stamina and it has a 2-turn cooldown, and this skill will give the enemy monster a damage boost as well as possession. So Vitamin Overdose can be kind of like a double-edged sword. The good thing about Vitamin Overdose is that not only are you taking control of the enemy monster, you're also going to be giving them a little damage boost that only lasts for 1 turn. So during the course of the time that the enemy monster is technically on your team, it's going to be dealing more damage to its own team. However, you do need to be extremely careful with Vitamin Overdose. For example, if you try to do Vitamin Overdose on an enemy monster immune to possession, then you're only going to give them a damage boost. And you're probably thinking, well, Armor, that's obvious, I'm not going to do Vitamin Overdose on a monster immune to possession. Well, if you use Vitamin Overdose on a monster that has Bulwark, on a monster that has Hardened or Tough, there are so many monsters that have Hardened or Tough now, then there is a possibility that you might be giving that monster damage boost and the possession won't land. So you do have to be careful, because if that does happen, you're going to be in big trouble. So all in all, as long as there's a target to use Vitamin Overdose on, you're good to go. So if you do run this skill, just make sure not to use it or only use it as a last resort on a monster that has Hardened, Tough, or Bulwark. So on to skills group 3, we have Hunger Craze. Deals low special damage, may possess target, requires cooldown. Hunger Craze is a special based attack that deals 30 damage to a single enemy monster. It only costs 27 stamina and has a high 4-turn cooldown. However, this skill possesses the enemy monster for 2 full turns. That is insanely good. And this skill especially shines in Team Wars. With Super Tomato, you're going to be able to possess the enemy attacker for 2 turns. It's basically going to be a 4-on-2 battle for 2 full turns. That is so good. And as I already mentioned, typically the attacker will tend to run 2 strength runes, so most likely that attacker will be able to one-hit the enemy rarity. As long as it's like epic or below, it's going to be able to one-hit it, and then even after it eliminates the rarity, it's still going to be on your team for 1 more turn. And check this out, after the attacker is no longer possessed, you'd be able to use Vitamin Overdose to possess him 1 more time and give him a damage boost. Or if you don't want to use Vitamin Overdose, you can use Deadly Recipe to drain most likely his remaining stamina, so he's going to have to recharge anyways. And then on the following turn you can use Vitamin Overdose if you want to, if you're running the skill. It's just so crazy to me that Super Tomato, because of his possession skills, he can basically take control of the enemy attacker for the duration of the game. And because Super Tomato is immune to possession, you most likely don't need to worry about the enemy magic monster immobilizing you. It goes without saying that you absolutely have to run Hunger Craze. This is by far Super Tomato's best skill. The next skill we have is Bad Nutrition. Removes 25% stamina from all targets, applies stamina leak to all targets, requires cooldown. So this is a magic based AoE that deals no damage to all enemy monsters, it costs 30 stamina points, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. And so this skill will remove 25% stamina points from the enemy monsters, as well as give them stamina leak, which currently no monster is immune to. So on its own, Bad Nutrition really isn't that great of a skill. However, when you look at the rest of Super Tomato's skills, you realize that Bad Nutrition has a lot of great synergy. For example, if you start the game off by using Hunger Craze on the enemy attacker, you use Bad Nutrition on the whole enemy team, then just take a look at how much stamina the enemy attacker is gonna have. Thanks to Hunger Craze, the enemy attacker would have probably used 27 plus stamina to attack its own team. Bad Nutrition would drain 25% of stamina, plus when it's the attacker's turn again, Stamina Leak would take away another 15%, and thanks to Hunger Craze again, it's gonna use another attack, gonna use up more stamina points to attack its teammate. And on the third turn, when the attacker is no longer possessed, thanks to Stamina Leak, it's gonna lose another 15% of stamina. By that point, it's gonna have to recharge. And all the meanwhile, keep in mind that Bad Nutrition would have also been draining stamina from the enemy magic monster, who is of course immune to possession. So Bad Nutrition is a pretty good skill, one that I personally would recommend and one that I will be running in my build. And the final skill we have for Super Tomato is Maddening Juice. Monster loses 25% of its own life, may possess all targets, requires cooldown. So here we have another magic based attack that deals no damage, it costs 30 stamina, and it has a high fortune cooldown. So this skill drains 25% of life from Super Tomato, that's an important key distinction. It drains life from your own monster, and other than that, it's basically an AoE possession. So this skill is a little awkward to say the least, and I say it's awkward because there are so many magic monsters that have an AoE possession skill that doesn't reduce their own life, and they also don't have a fortune cooldown. However, I've said this discussed before, because Super Tomato is a denier, you can argue whether that even matters. But to bring up one valid argument, in Team Wars, the enemy magic monster will most likely be immune to possession. Actually, most likely, the enemy magic monster on defense for Team Wars will be an Egg Eater, because Egg Eater, in my opinion, is the best magic monster to put on defense. So if that is the case, you really wouldn't want to start the game off with this attack. It'd be one of the worst things you can do. And I say that because of the structure of Team Wars. The enemy magic monster is going to be immune to possession, so that's a lost cause. You can possess the enemy attacker, that's good. And as for the rarity monster, if it's rare below, possessing that monster really isn't going to do much good. So you would have essentially sacrificed 25% of your own life to possess the enemy attacker. Now for the rarity, it's an epic or legendary. In that case, maddening juices would be a pretty good skill to use. So if you run this skill, be careful on the timing of when to use it. I'm going to argue that for the most part, any Team Wars you do, you really only need Hunger Craze because of the 2-turn possession. Once again, I'm going to go over how good this skill really is. Super Tomato has one of the highest base speeds of all magic monsters, so on an equal playing field, if you and your opponent have the same level runes, your Super Tomato should be going first. Now because your Super Tomato is going first, and because the enemy magic monster is immune to possession, it's obviously not a good idea to start the game off with AoE possession. That just doesn't make sense. So thus you start the game off with Hunger Craze and you possess the enemy attacker for 2 turns. So then the enemy magic monster goes. If the enemy monster does its AoE possession, well then you're just gonna have to recharge with your attacker and your other monster. So regardless of whose attacker goes next, if it's yours you recharge, if it's the enemy, it's gonna be attacking its own team. If the rarity is, like I said, a rare below, most likely the enemy attacker will just knock it out in 1 hit, then it might go over to your rarity, or if the rarity just has a really low base speed, then it goes back to Super Tomato, in which case you can use Bad Nutrition to hit the enemy magic monster and to hit the enemy attacker, or you can use Deadly Recipe on the enemy magic monster, so then at that point they will most likely only be able to use 1 more attack before they have to recharge. And then at that point it really depends what the enemy magic monster does. If it possesses your attacker 1 more time, then you're just gonna have to recharge, and then the attacker is still on your side, so it's gonna attack itself or attack the enemy magic monster, and then when it goes back to Super Tomato, all you have to do is take control of the enemy attacker once again, or drain its stamina. There's just so many different ways you can go about a game thanks to Super Tomato. His skills are just so good. Let's just take a look at the following 2 skills to show you the amazing synergy Super Tomato has. If you start the game off with Vitamin Overdose on the enemy attacker, it's possessed, right? And then this skill only has a 2-turn cooldown. On the following turn you use Hunger Craze, which will possess the enemy attacker for another 2 turns. So that's gonna be 3 turns of possession. And guess what? When the possession finally runs out, you can use Vitamin Overdose 1 more time. So then you would have possessed the enemy attacker for 4 turns. For 4 turns, how crazy is that? And by the way, 2 of those turns it had a damage boost. That is just so good. Or just to give you guys another example, if you want to start the game off with Hunger Craze, that's a 2-turn possession. Then after Hunger Craze runs out, you'd also be able to use Vitamin Overdose, and if you needed to possess again, you'd be able to rely on Maddening Juices. That's another possible scenario. Or to take a look at more synergy, Hunger Craze followed by Bad Nutrition, that's a really good way to rid the enemy attacker's stamina by the time it's no longer possessed. Or you could very much use Hunger Craze and Deadly Recipe, that also works really great. Both Deadly Recipe and Bad Nutrition, those 2 skills help you against the enemy magic monster who isn't immune to possession. So now I'm going to give you guys my recommended skill set for Super Tomato if you're making a build for Team Wars. If you're making a build for PvP, just hang on. For Team Wars, you want to run Hunger Craze, Bad Nutrition, Vitamin Overdose, and Deadly Recipe. If you're wondering why I'm choosing not to run Maddening Juice, the AoE possession, is because this skill really only works in player versus player, where you get to pick whatever team you want to fight. In Team Wars, I already mentioned the enemy magic monster is immune to possession, so it's kind of a waste to even have an AoE possession skill. But then you're thinking, Armor, what if for Team Wars it's legendary, magic, and some other elements? Well, if that is the case, from my experience, the monster that tends to be in that legendary category, if that other element isn't thunder, it's going to be a Voltic. And Voltic is pretty much indirectly immune to possession. So you really wouldn't want to use an AoE possession skill, especially one that drains 1/4 of your own life against an enemy Voltic. Because even if you do land possession on that Voltic, guess what? It's going to use an extra turn skill, possession wears off, and then it's going to kick your butt. So Maddening Juice is not a skill I recommend in Team Wars. There are obvious examples when it could come in handy, such as when it's a Team Wars involving an epic, a magic, and some other elements, in which case you probably do want to possess the epic and the enemy attacker. But if that is the case, I would advise you guys to use a different magic monster for that particular battle. Or if you don't have any other magic monsters to choose from, you can still rely on Hunger Craze. Just use this skill against the enemy attacker, and hopefully that enemy attacker can either one-hit the enemy epic, or at the very least maybe you can immobilize it, you never know. If you want to make Super Tomato just for player versus player, switch out Bad Nutrition for Maddening Juice. Because quite honestly, for player versus player, you don't need Bad Nutrition. You don't need the AoE stamina drain / stamina leak, that's just a waste of time. And it goes without without saying, Super Tomato is the kind of monster you want to run 3 speedruns on. The best speedruns you have, give them to Super Tomato. In my opinion, Super Tomato has what it takes to be classified as one of the best magic monsters of the whole entire game. This is of course with respect to Team Wars, specifically offense. For defense, not so much, but the way I analyze monsters describing how good can an actual player be using that monster as opposed to the AI using a monster, because we all know the AI will never do the right thing. So with all that being said, I want to hear from all of you guys. What do you think about Super Tomato? Do you agree with me or you disagree with me? Do you think he has what it takes to be one of the best, or do you think he's not that great? Please be sure to comment below. Also let me know what skill set you're going to use for him. Do you agree with me that you shouldn't even bother using the AoE possession, or do you think you should still run that skill? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to know what you guys think about Super Tomato. And also, like always, make sure to comment what monster you want to see analyzed next. And like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.